Chapter 201, Hurry up old dog. Grunting beneath his breath, the dark Grand Magus Edwin soared into the sky like the branch of a willow tree whipping into the air. As he did so, Han Sha'o's sharp knife-like palm cut through the air. Stuck in Edwin's heart, the demon slayer edge seemed to be under the draw of an immense force and forcefully flew out of his body, flying through the air. Fresh blood dripping from his back, Edwin's expression was an ugly grimace as he chanted a magic spell. Another hand of death appeared in the air and started hurtling down upon Han Sha'o like a mountain. An enormous arc covered Han Sha'o's body, making it very difficult for him to breathe. A thought grew in his mind as the demon slayer edge flew toward Han Sha'o like a rainbow. He suddenly activated the art of the mnemonic ninth heavens and shot through the enormous aura surrounding him. As the hand of death reached his head, he shot towards Florida's escaping group. When the second blow missed, Edwin distanced himself from Han Sha'o. The speed at which he flew towards the horizon was clearly much nimbler than Archmage Emily. Perhaps Han Sha'o would have been able to meet him head-on if the opponent had been Florida. But Edwin was a Dark Grand Magus. Such potential was most definitely sufficient to overwhelm Han Sha'o. So once the situation turned ugly, he needed to withdraw immediately. Treacherous little breath. Your death is certain, Edwin bellowed hoarsely from above. Unexpectedly, he ignored Belinda entirely as he shot straight toward Han Sha'o. Defeating him was out of the question, but as for escaping, the flexibility and speed of the art of the mnemonic ninth heavens instantly displayed its power, gradually increasing the distance between Han Sha'o and Edwin. Suddenly a group of 10 or so people appeared before him. Florida hovered midair, his long hair billowing. Below him, a few elite members of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band sprinted through the thick shrubbery at lightning speed. This time Rainbow Sickle's target had only been Han Sha'o in their trip from the Valley of Sunshine. Therefore they had only mobilized some experts. But who would have thought they would be so unlucky as to run into Edwin, someone with a grudge against Florida's grandfather, and fall into such a miserable state? Even though they were escaping in the same direction, Han Sha'o's speed had clearly surpassed Florida's group. The fact that he would be able to catch up to these people had also been part of Han Sha'o's plans. Laughing coldly, Han Sha'o approached them from behind, using the flexibility granted by the art to leisurely suspend himself on the bodies of Florida's group. With Han Sha'o's chant, lance after lance of bone spears pierced towards Florida like arcs of electricity flashing in midair. Damn it! Florida, in the midst of running for his life, suddenly heard the whistling sounds of bone spears breaking through the air. He turned his head back and discovered a sinisterly smiling Han Sha'o looking down at him with a cold smile. In that moment Florida couldn't help but swear. A ball of eye-blinding light shot out from Florida's staff. A radiant slash spell was flung out and pulverized the 3 bone spears. At the same time, however, the difference between the levitation spell and Han Sha'o's art was made apparent. They had both chanted spells, but Han Sha'o's speed hadn't been affected at all, whereas Florida's originally swiftly moving speed had decreased by a third. A strange wind sound quickly approached from the distance, and Han Sha'o understood that Edwin was swiftly catching up. A mocking smile hanging from his lips, Han Sha'o once again slowed down and clung to Florida's trail like a ghoul. He chanted the bone spear spell again as another 3 bone spears flew out. Florida wasn't afraid of Han Sha'o, but he was inordinately afraid of Edwin. If it hadn't been for Edwin's pursuit, Florida would have absolutely stopped and brought his significant prowess to battle Han Sha'o. However, he also obviously didn't want Edwin to catch up to him because of Han Sha'o. Therefore he could only continue his defense and reduce his speed again and again. Chief, we'll hold him off for you. You get out of here. At this moment some of the Rainbow Sickle experts out in front of Florida suddenly halted as one of them yelled loudly. They'd all witnessed Edwin's strength just now. If they stayed, they might be able to hold back Han Sha'o, but they'd never be able to defend against Edwin. Speaking these words at this moment meant that they'd already made their plans to die. Alright, I'll get revenge for you. Florida was a ruthless person, alright. Although he was a bit pained, he still decisively accepted their suggestion and glared ferociously at Han Sha'o, then turning and dashing forward. 2 crossbows suddenly locked onto Han Sha'o as 2 mercenaries' sharp eyes gave Han Sha'o a prickling feeling of danger. 2 sounds pierced through the air as 2 bolts brought a terrifying air current with them. They shot toward him with a speed and accuracy beyond Han Shao-Oh's imagination. The quickly advancing Han Shao had to rapidly back up. He didn't dare rush another step forward. In this process, some of the archers notched their bows and took aim at Han Shao. Their skill was in stark contrast to Belinda's methods just now. Since Han Shao had already taken to the sky, he was hard-pressed to evade the danger from below and had to back up once again. Han Shao hesitated and planned on immediately changing direction. At this moment, the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries beneath him suddenly started panicking. A milky white respondent server aura suddenly shot out from their midst as Trunks appeared on the back of his manticore. He was waving his sword around with a cold expression and forced the mercenaries back so that they had no energy to spare for Han Shao. Trunks. Up in the air, Han Shao was flabbergasted by the disturbance below, and he couldn't help but dive down to exclaim in joy. Fly through the air to keep harassing Florida. I'll handle these traitors on the ground who should have died 10,000 times. We'll chat when we get back to the Valley of Sunshine. Trunks threw back his head and flashed a brilliant smile. The charming handsome Trunks was attacking the experts of Rainbow Sickle from the back of his manticore. Trunks, don't you bully others to the extreme. The expert who had spoken before suddenly glared ferociously at Trunks. Bully others to the extreme? Exclamation mark. Haha. The old chief was so good to you and none of you guys said anything after that animal Florida took control. You just blindly followed behind him. How dare you say these words to me now? Trunks laughed as if he'd heard something hilarious, but his smile was even colder than the frosty night wind and his tone spoke of a hatred etched bone deep. Edwin's figure was drawing closer, drawing a cold laugh from Trunks. Trunks lifted his head once again and urged Han Shao on. Brian, hurry and go. Take advantage of this opportunity to kill Florida. Alright, that old monster behind us is a tough bird. Run away immediately if he draws near and don't meet him head on. Although Han Shao didn't understand why Trunks hated Florida that much, he guessed it must have something to do with the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band. The experts present here seemed to be acquainted with Trunks, and so this meant that there was some type of relationship between them. Han Shao realized that he wouldn't be able to measure up to Trunks' strong belief in him if he didn't immediately give chase. He darted through the air like lightning and shot for Florida. Edwin arrived shortly after Han Shao's departure as well. He cast a glance down and didn't linger when he noticed that both Florida and Han Shao were absent. He followed Han Shao's trail and seemed to be completely unconcerned with Trunks and those of the Red Sickle mercenary band below. Han Shao had already gotten a taste of Florida's abilities earlier. He definitely wouldn't be able to live in peace if the latter didn't die. The place of extreme water was located within the valley, so he needed to stay here for a while longer. If Florida didn't die, he'd have no end of trouble in the future. So even if Phoebe hated him for it, Han Shao needed to kill him. The flying art of a demonic cultivator enabled Han Shao to slowly catch up to Florida when he circulated his magical yuan to the utmost, even after lingering halfway. When the bone spears once again whistled through the air, Florida almost wanted to spit blood in his anger. He now knew that Han Shao wanted to go down with him and have them both die to Edwin. In his irritation, he truly wanted to stop and fight Han Shao to death. Just what do you want? When that old monster Edwin catches up to us, neither one of us will be able to escape. Florida roared out furiously at Han Shao as the scene from earlier repeated again. Florida used the Radiant Slash to hack Han Shao's bone spears into pieces. Hey, it strikes my fancy today that I'll die with you. Han Shao had an incredibly refreshing and relieving feeling after venting the dejected feeling he'd felt from being suppressed by Florida in the last 2 days. Even with Edwin catching up to them, Han Shao was confident that he could make use of his magic to get away. With Han Shao's understanding of mages, he could also be certain that Florida wouldn't be able to maintain flight for too long, and thus, this was why he'd done this. Crazy f***ing madman. Han Shao's words finally caused Florida to start gussing. Because Florida and Han Shao's speed had decreased, Edwin's figure appeared from behind them at this moment, and his odd cackling traveled to them first. Hurry up, old dog, I'm waiting for you. Han Shao even had the time to laugh wildly and look back at Edwin, egging him on with his words. You better pray that I don't catch you, or I'll make you regret that you've ever lived. Edwin was absolutely incensed by the mention of old dog. Even the injury on his back seemed to throb with more pain after hearing that. Han Shao had long since pulled out the arrow that Belinda had shot into his calf, and this was when his durable body showed off its capabilities. His blood had stopped flowing out of the wound, and apart from some minor pain there was no impact to Han Shao's movements. When the three bone spears once again shot out, Florida had to reach out a hand and defend himself. Han Shao made use of this time to release a dark mist spell. It was night to begin with, and there was no other light in the sky apart from the crescent moon. When the dark mist spell appeared again, it shrouded Han Shao and Florida in a patch of darkness in which even one's own hand couldn't be seen. Damn it! Florida emitted blinding light from his magic staff but could only illuminate a small patch around him. He scrambled to defend himself against the bone spears and thereby decreased his flight speed even more. "Kid, I'll take your life first to pay back some of your grandfather's debt to me." Edwin had finally caught up to them, but Han Shao slipped away like a bit of smoke and vanished in the direction of the Valley of Sunshine, leaving behind only Florida, who'd been obstructed by the three bone spears. Han Shao wouldn't be so stupid as to conceal his traces in front of a dark Grand Magus. When the mental strength of a freak like this covered everything, even someone truly dead would be revealed to him. Therefore Han Shao could only use the advantage of his speed to leave this place of danger as soon as possible and leave Florida behind to bring up the rear. As Han Shao's figure slowly faded into the distance, the dark mist magic also started to dissipate. When Florida once again saw the clean moonlight reappear in the desolate night sky, he was also greeted with the sight of Edwin, enraged to the point where steam was spewing from his face. "In the name of the god of light, bind all darkness, shackles of light." Florida panicked when he saw Edwin and didn't think at all before he released the light magic spell Shackles of Light. Hula hoops of light sparkled with clean pure light and rolled beneath the bright moonlight surrounding Edwin. The bands of light were filled with the purest of light elements and had an enormous restraining power. "This little fellow has such a high grasp of comprehension in light magic at such a young age. He will surely become a thorn in the side of our Calamity Church in the future. It looks like I can't allow you to leave alive today." When faced with the shackles of light, the dark Grand Magus Edwin neither panicked nor grew frantic, and his angrily scowling face from earlier regained its peace. He chanted out a dark magic spell and waved his staff at the approaching shackles of light. A boundless surge of energy seemed to want to rip into everything as it churned the two bands of light closest to him into pieces. Suddenly the remaining bands of light all formed into one string as lightning started sparking and crackling all over the bands of light. The shackles of light had originally only be able to restrain enemies, but it had suddenly turned into an enormously strong killing machine in the span of a second and tried to churn Edwin into pieces. "Hey, you've got some skills alright to be able to combine thunder magic with the shackles of light," Edwin exclaimed softly as he was completely enveloped in the radiant flashes of lightning and bright light. An inky black magic shield covered Edwin and three hands of death appeared in the air, grabbing the shackles of light. They pulled apart the bands of light with brute force, and the violently sparking lightning found it completely impossible to injure the hands of death. PFFT. Florida spat out a mouthful of fresh blood and then ran blindly away, seemingly unwilling to spend another moment there. Melding together, the light and thunder magic was obviously out of his control, and he'd been hit with the backlash of expending too much magic. That had resulted in immediate significant injury. However, Edwin had easily broken through such a strong blow, displaying that the differences in their strengths were indeed too hard to cross. Florida knew that he would be hard-pressed to escape death if he stayed for another moment. Although Edwin had broken through Florida's spell, it had taken him some time to do so. When Edwin then cleared away the remnants of the magic, he discovered that Florida had once again disappeared. Florida was wavering through the sky in flight at this moment due to expending too much mental strength. However, the valley had finally appeared in front of him, and he'd be able to make it to safety before long. No matter how much the Cairo and Rainbow Sickle mercenary bands were at odds with each other, the Cairo mercenary band still had to follow the rules of the valley. So once Florida entered the valley, whoever tried to kill him would face the attacks of all the assembled powers. Add to that the fact that most of the Rainbow Sickle band was stationed within the valley. Edwin would be able to do nothing to Florida once he made it inside. However, when he saw the border of the valley, Han Shao's coldly smirking figure appeared at the same time and blocked the way that he needed to take, obviously not planning on letting him make it inside alive. Chapter 202. I'll remember you. If a person expressed the attitude of wanting to kill you at all costs, then the only way for you to live was to kill him before he killed you. Han Shao and Florida hadn't seen eye to eye from the very beginning, and the matter with Phoebe had magnified this enmity even more so. Not only had Florida expressed his desire to kill Han Shao from the very beginning, he'd also taken actual action. Han Shao would naturally not sit there and patiently await his death. A day's worth of pursuit had now extended into the depths of the night. The bright moon hung high in the sky like a giant, a cold eye looking down on everything beneath it. Strong gusts of chilly wind shook the towering trees and blew away the thick snow cover on the ancient branches, the falling snow whispering in people's ears. Han Shao was standing in the air carrying the demon slayer edge in his right hand with a cold expression on his face. His gaze stern and emotionless, he seemed to be a lofty mountain range obstructing Florida's path of hope. Florida only had the chance to live if he made it past Han Shao. "If you step aside now, I promise to never go up against you in the future." Caught in the throes of a magical backlash, Florida had greatly expended his energy in his desperate flight for life. His injuries were now severe and his strength far depleted. A tinge of resignation colored his words as he looked at Han Shao. A charming smile was plastered across his face, yet Han Shao's laugh was as cold as an icy cavern. He looked meaningfully at Florida and shook his head. "I'm sorry, I think your corpse is much more reassuring than your promise." When he heard those words, Florida knew that there was no way out for him. His face darkened as he said, "My grandfather is the Grand Magus Ferguson of the Church of Light. There's nothing in it for you if you become enemies with me. Even if you can kill me today, my grandfather will never let you off the hook." Even if Florida was injured, he still tried to create the illusion of strength with these words. But for Han Shao, with his current strength, not only was he unafraid of Florida bringing out his grandfather to threaten him, he was now even more certain that Florida had nothing left in his tank. Otherwise Florida wouldn't have wasted all this time talking to him. "If I don't kill you today, I'll face danger from both you and your grandfather. But if you're dead, I only need to face your grandfather. Therefore go die." His words icy, Han Shao readied himself to kill. A pile of stark white bones appeared beneath the pristine moonlight as Han Shao chanted. Gleaming coldly, the bones quickly assembled into a bone prison that was 3 meters wide and 4 meters tall, contracting rapidly around Florida. Han Shao suddenly shot towards Florida with a merciless expression when the bone prison had completely formed, moving through the night sky like lightning. Even if his strength was greatly spent, Florida was still a light major archmage, particularly as he'd also dual majored in thunder magic. Han Shao had seen everything quite clearly in the distance when Florida had faced off against Edwin, and knew that his strength was quite frightening. Therefore, with Han Shao's advantage in magical cultivation, the smartest thing for him to do was to close the distance between him and Florida. No matter how strong Florida was, Han Shao was confident that he'd be able to kill him if he was within close combat range. A light major spell suddenly exploded out with Florida as the epicenter. The eye-piercingly strong light brought with it the pure divine strength of light. The spell formed sharp ripples as it crashed onto the bone prison in front of him. Light major had always been a natural counter to necromancy magic. When the pure and divine strength of light collided with the bone prison, the originally gleaming white bones seemed to undergo 100 years of corrosion as they started to crumble. The strong defenses had become so brittle that they wouldn't even be able to withstand the slightest blow, and so exploded into pieces when Florida struck fiercely with his magic staff. Although he'd broken out of the cage, Florida's face was even more drained of blood than before. It was obvious that he'd expended too much mental strength and had taxed his body beyond its limits. At that moment, Han Shao suddenly appeared next to him, the demon slayer edge sparkling with a murderous light. He slashed at Florida's neck, utterly determined to end his life with one deadly strike. The magic staff in Florida's hand suddenly exploded with white light as an enormous power within suddenly erupted. Florida hurled his staff at the demon slayer edge. A metallic clang rang out as the two connected, and the magical yuan-infused demon slayer edge ripped a large hole through Florida's staff of unknown materials. However, the power within the staff obstructed Han Shao for a slight moment, making him falter involuntarily in the air for a moment. On the other side, frothy blood was now running down from Florida's mouth, trailing down his neck to dye his chest a vivid red. His handsome face was now as pale as paper, and the blood by his mouth made him appear even more frightening. At this point, he wasn't so much flying to the Valley of Sunshine, but swaying his way to it instead. High-quality magic staffs could store a portion of the caster's magic within it and release it at critical moments. Florida's actions just now had obviously been that the magical elements within the staff had acted as a catalyst to cause an explosion and make Han-Sha-Oh pause for a second. By the valley's fence, the Cairo mercenary band's vice chief Harris seemed to have received some sort of message and was looking in that direction with some of his experts at his side. They had long since seen the battle going on outside but was casting a dispassionate eye upon things and hadn't intervened. Everyone in the valley knew of the enmity between the Cairo and Rainbow Sickle mercenary bands. The Cairo mercenaries had an obligation to interfere as long as Florida set foot within the valley. However, Han-Sha-Oh and Florida's fight was taking place outside the valley at the moment. Additionally, with Harris' hatred of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band, he likely was passionately wishing for Han-Sha-Oh to kill Florida. Pausing for a moment, Han-Sha-Oh saw that Florida was about to enter the valley. Behind him, Edwin had once again reappeared as well. Han-Sha-Oh immediately circulated his magical yuan to its utmost and shot across the sky, leaving a smoke trail as he made for Florida. Suddenly a fire dragon rose into the air and shot out from the valley's fence, churning toward Han-Sha-Oh. Han-Sha-Oh had wanted to kill Florida but was forced from his path in order to evade. He first used the dark mist spell to create cover and then summoned a zombie to substitute for himself in the face of the fire dragon's wrath. Han-Sha-Oh looked down at the dark mist and noticed that a fire mage had appeared by the valley border. There was a rapidly approaching cavalry troop in the distance wearing the uniform of the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries as well. "Damn it, why are they here?" Harris growled in anger. Chief, are you alright?" The Rainbow Sickle mercenaries immediately surrounded Florida when they drew nearer and asked anxiously. Florida was still suffering from immense shock and fright and finally breathed a huge sigh of relief at the sight of his own people. He turned his head to point viciously at Han-Sha-Oh. "Kill him." Florida's body fell into a dead faint as soon as he'd finished speaking. It looked like the trials he'd suffered along the way had caused him great trauma. The appearance of the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries made Han-Sha-Oh understand that he no longer had any opportunities to kill Florida. However, since Florida had fainted, Han-Sha-Oh understood that even though he hadn't died, he was half dead anyways. It would take him a long time to recover from this. Han-Sha-Oh didn't wait for the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries to make their move but shot into the valley from above and landed a few meters in front of Harris. According to the valley's rules, even if one had the ability to fly, one couldn't enter the valley using flight. However, Han-Sha-Oh's earlier fight with Florida had been completely witnessed by those in the Cairo mercenary band. The enemy of one's enemy was a friend, and so not only did Harris very magnanimously forgive Han-Sha-Oh's actions but immediately gestured for his men to form a wall in front of Han-Sha-Oh. "I'm sorry, now that he's entered the valley, fights cannot occur in the Valley of Sunshine or our Cairo mercenary band would intervene." Harris' expression was calm as he grasped his double-headed battle axe tightly, radiating a willingness to explode into battle at any moment. Chief Florida's grave injuries were a large blow to the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries, not only in terms of strength but also reputation. The eyes of the mercenaries all spat fire as they looked in Han-Sha-Oh's direction, but Harris had expressed his intention to abide by the rules and so they were caught in a dilemma. "Let's stabilize the chief's injuries first. They'll pay as soon as the chief is alright." The fire mage who had attacked Han-Sha-Oh earlier cast a glance at Florida's face and suddenly opened his mouth to speak. This person likely had a very high position within the mercenary band, as no one else said anything after his suggestion. They all glared furiously at Han-Sha-Oh, leaving quickly with Florida in their care. "Friend, you must be more careful. Florida will not let you off easily after he wakes up. Although our men patrol all over the Valley of Sunshine, we still can't fully prevent people from making some mischief. I think you know what I mean." Harris' attitude was much warmer compared to the first time he'd seen Han-Sha-Oh. The cold lines of his face had softened as he spoke a word of warning to Han-Sha-Oh. Florida's grave injuries greatly benefited the Cairo mercenary band, and as Florida's rival, Han-Sha-Oh was the Cairo mercenary band's friend. No wonder Harris' attitude was so friendly toward Han-Sha-Oh. The Cairo mercenaries were on patrol all throughout the valley, but their energy was limited. It was impossible for them to keep an eye out all the time. When the fuming Florida woke up, he would absolutely pursue revenge at all costs. Even if he was in the Valley of Sunshine, he would likely pick the perfect time to make his move, so Han Sha-oh wasn't truly safe within the valley as well. Nodding, Han Sha-oh spoke with a slight smile. Thank you, it's not that easy to kill me either. Edwin had also made it over at this time and landed on the ground near the border. His gaze fixed itself tightly on Han Sha-oh as he said, I want to enter the valley. What procedures do I need to take care of? Han Sha-oh's head began to throb at these words. The arrival of such an old freak was an even greater threat to him than Florida. However, the Valley of Sunshine had its rules as well, and they wouldn't turn away such a god of wealth. Kid, you're called Brian, aren't you? There are fewer and fewer people who can inflict injuries on my body as the years go on. I'll remember you. Edwin rubbed his aching back as he went through the appropriate procedures. He threw a ghastly smile at Han Sha-oh, the various crevices and motes on his face scrunching together to appear quite stern. You should forget me instead. I don't want to see you again. Han Sha-oh smiled ruefully in response, walking into the valley nursing a headache and thinking of how to prepare appropriate measures. Edwin came from the Calamity Church and had the strength of a dark Grand Magus. He was a significant force to be reckoned with across the entire profound continent. That such a character hadn't been immediately killed meant that he would have an almost unimaginable amount of trouble in the future. Han Sha-oh was now besieged with an enormous headache and wanted to leave the valley immediately. Everything could wait until he returned to the cemetery of death through the transportation matrix. The end of the night had arrived unknowingly, and Emily was rather sleepy when Han Sha-oh returned to the dark mantle. When she saw Han Sha-oh reappear in front of her, the slightly confused look in her eyes slowly cleared up. She said gleefully, you're alright. Did you see Trunks? Nodding, Han Sha-oh said with surprise, how did you know Trunks is here? The dark mantle has a small intelligence network within the valley. Trunks entered the valley by himself shortly after you left. I know that the two of you are close, so I had a chat with him when he entered the valley. When he learned that Florida was making a move against you, he immediately left again and rushed in the direction of Valen City. I didn't go with him because I had to stay here and wait for news from my superiors. Emily explained. Elaine's dead. I fell victim to a trap and almost got killed. Han Sha-oh sighed and sat down. When she heard of Elaine's death, a sad expression appeared on Emily's beautiful face and she grew very quiet. After a while she sighed heavily and softly said, although big sister Elaine didn't know how to fight, she was very capable. She'd operated her small hotel in Valen City for many years and supplied us with valuable advice many a time. She's helped us so much but died because of us. If Han Sha-oh and Emily hadn't appeared, and if they hadn't given Belinda over to Elaine's care in the rush, Elaine wouldn't have died either. It was because Han Sha-oh didn't have a deep relationship with Elaine that he wasn't hit with any particularly tragic feelings. When he saw Emily's grief-stricken expression, he patted her shoulder lightly and spoke a few words of comfort. Emily's mood improved as Han Sha-oh comforted her in a low voice. It was then that she remembered the true task at hand. Just what happened? Han Sha-oh recounted the events in great detail, making Emily shudder in fright when she heard of the dangerous happenings on this trip. She cheered for Han Sha-oh's escape and prayed for him during his dangerous encounters. Emily was still caught up in the shock from what had happened after Han Sha-oh had finished and lifted his pan leg to see the now clotted wound. Don't take such risks in the future. If Belinda's arrow hadn't landed here, then you would have been in a lot of danger. Don't worry if the direction of her arrow was more dangerous. I naturally wouldn't have sat there just to be hit by it. I would have immediately evaded and escaped as far as possible. His actions had brought certain results in the end. Although Edwin's back injury wasn't as severe as Florida's, it would be enough to cause him grief for some time. We're in trouble now. Florida is already a tough person to shake off, and now we have Edwin to deal with as well. He has a high position in the Calamity Church and is quite vicious and brutal. You've even hurt him. I don't know whether to be proud or worried for you. Emily sighed with a look of worry on her face. Don't worry, if it comes down to it, we can return to the cemetery of death. As long as we stay in a place where no one can find us, we'll be able to defend ourselves or attack after we set up the transportation matrix. Han Sha-oh held a rather optimistic view as he smiled to comfort Emily. At this time, the old man looking after the Dark Mantle stronghold walked over and knocked on the door. Mistress Emily, Chief Warden of the Cairo Mercenary Band, requests that you and Master Brian pay a visit. Understood, Grandpa Kemby. Emily responded lightly and looked at Han Sha-oh. It looks like we may have allies. Chapter 203, forcing a fight. The sky had completely brightened and the air had grown cooler. The sun the size of a disk was slowly rising in the sky. A resplendent sunrise stood tall and upright over the inky blue clouds and sparkled with a soft red light ripping apart the clouds covering the heavens. Small groups of people traveled on the morning streets in the Valley of Sunshine as they wandered out of the dens of temptation from the various alleys off the streets yawning with sleepy expressions. It was apparent that they'd expended great effort on the bodies of women last night. There are truly so many disgusting fellows with no taste. Emily wasn't in the best of moods as she flicked a cold glance at those walking out of the alleys with untidy clothing, speaking with a look of distaste on her face. Han Shao wasn't overly tired by the chase that had lasted all night. He looked around interestedly and didn't respond. "Oh right, Phoebe came to find you last night. I said you were out of business." Emily drew her coat together tightly by the neck and turned her head to speak to Han Shao. She didn't say anything. Han Shao started slightly and thought of what Phoebe had gone to do. "No, she likely doesn't have anything to say to me." Emily responded, paused and suddenly drew close to Han Shao in a gossipy fashion. She lowered her voice. "Did you do that to her?" Shaking his head, Han Shao was all business as he said righteously. "How could I do that? We've only met for a few months. Am I someone in that much of a rush? PFFT, you violated me the day you met me through raping me, you shameless villain." Emily was quite disdainful of Han Shao's response and snorted with contempt. Han Shao couldn't help but laugh at her words. He didn't feel awkward but rather retorted, "Our circumstances were rather special. Besides, you were so alluring. How could my hot blood not withstand your temptations? Villain, all you know is how to talk nonsense." Emily's breath was caught in her anger but was rather satisfied by his answer and she didn't continue the conversation. When he saw that some happiness was marking Emily's brows, Han Shao knew that she wasn't actually angry. He suddenly thought of a problem and asked her, "Right, how did the Kyra mercenary band know of that place? Is it that they know the Dark Mantle controls the shop?" Contrary to Han Shao's expectations, Emily actually nodded her head. She explained when she saw his look of befuddlement. "The Valley of Sunshine is different to a town or city of the Empire. The Kyra mercenary band holds control here. Since there is limited land here, they'll thoroughly investigate any comings and goings. It's a completely unrealistic thing to want to stay here and remain a secret. However, although they know that we're the Dark Mantle, they don't interfere with our operations at all because we target those with designs against the Lancelot Empire and won't purposefully make trouble for them." Brian, Han Shao and Emily were walking towards the Kyra mercenary band when they heard Trunks' voice. At this moment, Han Shao turned his head to see the Manticore riding Trunks appear from the direction of the entrance to the valley. There were some indistinct traces of blood on him in the Manticore. Behind them, the Rainbow Sickle experts had on looks of anger. It seemed like they'd come off worse in a fight. Han Shao patrolled sharp-eyed over Trunks' bodies but didn't discover any traces of ripped clothing on him. It looked like the fresh blood on him in the Manticore were from those of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band. "Are you alright?" Han Shao asked with a slight smile when Trunks had made it over on his Manticore. "Just a few cowardly traitors. How could they possibly harm me?" "Oh right, how did it go on your side? Did you kill that pathetic Florida?" Trunks responded confidently and looked closely at Han Shao, spreading his hands out with resigned expression on his face. Han Shao sighed. "His men saved him at the entrance to the valley. However, I think he'll have to spend at least a month or two to fully recover from his injuries." "Ha ha, that's good enough. I came to the Valley of Sunshine for his life this time and it looks like you've already done half the job for me. I thank you." Trunks laughed heartily and then looked back at the Rainbow Sickle members behind him with a coldly imposing expression. "Traitors, go back and tell Florida that I, Trunks, have returned again. I must take revenge for Annie. This time he'll die in my hands." The Rainbow Sickle mercenaries all had looks of hatred and anger when they heard these words, but they seemed to know that Trunks wasn't someone to be trifled with. They only snorted coldly a few times and circled past Han Shao and the others, moving towards another direction. "Trunks, why are you here and what enmity do you have with Florida?" Han Shao couldn't help but ask at this point. The merchants had already awakened on the streets of the valley and the streets began to bustle a bit. Trunks looked around with a slightly dismal expression, saying, "This isn't a place to speak. Let's find a place where we can chat and I'll tell you in greater detail. Alright, Han Shao nodded. Wait, Lord of the Kyra mercenary band has reached out to us. Why don't you have a good chat after we return? Emily couldn't help but speak up and remind her when she saw that Han Shao and Trunks seemed to want to immediately find a quiet place to chat. Han Shao only reacted after Emily had spoken and said to Trunks apologetically, Lord of the Kyra mercenary band sent people to find us early this morning asking us to pay a visit. Why don't we chat later? Nodding understandingly, Trunks walked side by side with Han Shao and said dashingly, let's go, I happen to know Lorden as well, let's go together. You know him? Han Shao started and asked Trunks with surprise. Of course, I spent some time in the valley back in the day and I know many people here, Trunks responded matter-of-factly. Emily revealed a surprised expression and looking thoughtfully at Trunks. There were no established streets of shops within the valley, just a few soaring cliff faces and some towering trees that blocked the sky a bit. Trunks seemed very familiar with this area as he led Han Shao and Emily inside. The terrain is quite precarious within the depths of the valley, but there's a vast expanse of plains after making it through a narrow tunnel in the cliffs. The strongest power within the valley has always lived there. It used to be the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band living there a few years ago. If it wasn't for Florida's evil scheme in killing the old chief, the Kyra mercenary band can only live elsewhere at this moment. Trunks started introducing the area around them as they walked. There were members of the Kyra mercenary band standing guard at certain intervals along the path. However, the distance between the guards were a bit far away and they weren't afraid of others hearing their words. Right, Trunks, just what kind of enmity is there between you and Florida? Han Shao couldn't help but ask when he saw that the surroundings were quiet enough. I was actually part of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band to begin with and I was a senior swordsman then. The old chief had always taken care of me and the chief's daughter Annie treated me like a brother. I was very comfortable in those days until Florida appeared. The young Florida brought with him a dazzling aura and enjoyed special treatment as soon as he joined. Not only did the old chief value him highly, but even Annie quite admired him. I myself had good relations with him as well. However, Florida's goal in coming to the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band was to fully control it. Even though the old chief had already given Annie over to his care, but he still felt that the old chief had too many days in front of him. He colluded with robbers and revealed our movements to them, causing great losses to the band. The old chief died when surrounded by the robbers and Annie vanished as well. It's likely that she met with a bad downfall as well. I was lucky enough to escape and personally witness the conversation between Florida and the head of the robbers. That was when I understood everything. From that moment forth I made up my mind to get rid of Florida sooner or later. Sadly, when Florida took control of the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries, he also invited a source of power from the Church of Light and consolidated his influence over the situation in an exceedingly short amount of time, thoroughly grasping the mercenary band. I was only a senior swordsman then and attempted to assassinate Florida with some injured mercenaries loyal to the old chief. We ended up being thoroughly defeated and fleeing for our lives. Many of my closest friends died in that battle. I entered the dark forest to train myself, nursing the determination to take revenge. I waited for 3 years, and when I heard that the fight over who is the strongest in the valley was about to take place, I knew that Florida is one who is unwilling to be left out. He will certainly contend with the Kyra mercenary band. I think this is a chance, and so I've come back. Trunks distantly regaled the tales of times gone by as they walked. His expression was very remote from beginning to end, as if describing something that had nothing to do with him. However, as the audience, Han Shao and Emily could discern from the events themselves the endless hate deep within Trunks' heart. When Trunks had finished, Han Shao looked deeply at Trunks and flashed a brilliant smile. It looks like we can team up again. I think Florida is dead without a doubt this time. Of course, he's definitely going to die, Trunks said confidently, and then looked at Emily interestedly, switching his gaze to Han Shao afterwards. He asked a bit oddly, and what's the deal with the two of you? If I recall correctly, this lady was captured by you, but why are the two of you walking together now? Chuckling heartily, Han Shao winked at Trunks and said, sometimes it's an easy thing for enemies to become friends, particularly between men and women. I understand, haha. Trunks burst out laughing and nodded in understanding. Two silly fellows. Emily was a bit angered and embarrassed by their words. She rolled her eyes at them and huffed. They had passed through a narrow tunnel as they chatted, arriving in an open plain. Black boulders were in abundance houses here and many tall buildings had been erected. These buildings were neither exquisite or beautiful, they were just tall, extremely practical. They seemed durable, sturdy, and would hold up well beneath ramming. There was a large parade ground on the way to the buildings, and several muscular mercenaries were practicing with various weapons. Some mages were releasing spells in a dense forest not too far away, and there were others meditating in the distance. This place is large enough and the buildings sturdy enough. Because there's only one path leading here, it's very safe and has always been the valley's last line of defense throughout the years. Trunks kept explaining on the way over here. Trunks, what are you doing back here? Harris of the Cairo mercenary Ben was standing on the parade ground in great spirits, seemingly waiting for Han Shao and the others. He was quite surprised to see Trunks and couldn't help but call out, Harris, long time no see. You look even more fierce now. But Florida is still thriving. Throughout these years it looks like you didn't get your revenge. Trunks spoke to Harris from afar with some mockery on his face. Humphrey, you also fled with severe injuries. What right do you have to talk about me? Harris' expression was stiff as he said irritably, forget it, I have nothing to say to you. Let's go, take me to Laurelton. Trunks frowned as he twitched his lips, urging Harris to lead the way. Harris led the three of them through the parade ground to a tall building. Rumbling crashes traveled from the inside of the building, and the three of them were greatly surprised by the scene in front of them when they walked in. A bald, fierce man about 2 meters tall was wearing only a pair of shorts. The muscles of his naked upper body were raised upwards, each as tough as iron ore. The blood vessels over his body throbbed as they were filled with frightening explosive power. There was a black boulder the size of a small mountain on his back. It was 3 times the size of him as he stood shouldering the boulder. He backed up rapidly so that his body sent the boulder crashing against a stone pillar that was as thick as 3 people wrapping their arms around it. Sweat flowed like rivulets down the lines of his muscles as his dark skin sparkled with healthy vigor. His gleaming head didn't have a single strand of hair on it. His body trembled continuously amidst the thunderous collision sites, and the entire building shook from the violent impacts, making one worry that it would collapse at any time. After Han Shao and the others had arrived, he collided 5 more times before finally throwing away the boulder on his back away to the side. The ground trembled like an earthquake had struck it, and the thunderous roaring sounds suffused the building. He raised his head and focused his eyes in their direction. A strong bout of forceful presence charged toward Han Shao. Han Shao's heart couldn't help but seize a bit, seeing how strong this person's body was. He had used only external training methods to train his body to the point where it naturally produced such a thick, forceful presence. This fully explained the frightening aspects of this person. Trunks, what are you doing back here? A strange light shone in the big man's eyes as he looked askance at Trunks. Long time no see, Laurelton. It looks like your physical body has almost been trained to the utmost. You could become berserk twice over previously. It looks like you've improved even more. I wonder if you can become berserk thrice over to reach the legendary 3rd realm of the berserks. Trunks revealed an interested expression as he stared at Laurelton. Grinning oddly, Laurelton didn't respond to Trunks' question and switched his attention to Han Shao. You're the fellow who almost killed Florida? Nodding, Han Shao smiled faintly. That's right. What might Chief Laurelton be summoning me for? I want to discuss a spot of business with you, but you need to eat one of my punches first so I can measure up your strength and see if you're worth me handing over that shop to you. Laurelton laughed loudly as a fist the size of a fan came crashing down on Han Shao with a fierce, dominating aura. Han Shao was slightly startled and realized that this punch encompassed a berserk force when it arrived in front of him. This greatly shocked him, and what was even more surprising was that when this strength surged forward, it blocked off all his avenues of retreat, making it so that he couldn't dodge at all. Han Shao was struck dumb with amazement as he immediately focused his concentration and deployed his magical cultivation to the maximum, planning on directly taking this punch. Chapter 204, My Own Power. An iron fist swung over with the momentum of wanting to cleave through mountains and split open rocks. The strong force rippled audibly through the air as an unbounded dominance spilled forth like the tides, making Han Shao's hair stand on end. Han Shao took a deep breath in and circulated his magical yu onto his right hand, deploying his magical cultivation to its extreme and turning his hand into the color of black jade. His very bones seemed to be made of black jade as his hand sparkled with a faint light. A cloud of purple magic circulated in the palm of his right hand, appearing as spellfire. Trunks and Emily had been shocked by the sudden development and was about to intervene when they saw Han Shao-Oh's right hand suddenly change. They all stood there flabbergasted and didn't say a word. After his hand had changed, Han Shao suddenly shot out from his defensive position at an unparalleled speed. He then pulled his right hand back and materialized a purple-black streak of lightning, smashing it into Lorden's oncoming punch. A thunderous crash that was even louder than when Lorden had crashed into the pillar with the boulder sounded the collision reverberating throughout the entire hall. An overwhelming force traveled up Han Shao-Oh's right hand into his body. The strength was beyond his imagining. If it wasn't for the perverse level of durability his body was at, his right hand would have absolutely shattered and exploded from this touch. Even so, his body couldn't help but fly backwards and crash into a black boulder in front of the hall doors with an audible crack. His body sagged to the ground as Chief Lorden stood firmly rooted like a boulder. However, an icy cold presence spread from his fist throughout his body and froze the small trickles of sweat running down his body into gleaming translucent pearls. White smoke rose from his body as the frosty air covered him. "Are you all right?" Emily flashed over to Han Shao in the blink of an eye, reaching to help him up. His arm was numb from his fist up to his shoulder and it was still trembling lightly even now. Han Shao panted heavily as his heart filled with shock, full of astonishment at Lorden's strength. "Lorden, it looks like your strength has improved once again. Don't think I can't tell, even though you've held back some of your strength. You may have already materialized the level of being berserk thrice over." Light danced in Trunks' eyes as he stared at Lorden's body. Han Shao had been about to comfort Emily when he heard Trunks' words. The shock in his heart grew even greater. From Trunks' word, Han Shao knew that perhaps that blow just now may have been fierce, but it still hadn't been Lorden's true strength. Based on the domineering strength from that blow, Han Shao was certain that Lorden wasn't any less inferior to Earthrider Clark or Swordmaster Phoebe. This wasn't even his true strength. If Lorden truly brought his full strength to bear, then it'd be even more astonishing. No wonder he was the chief of the Kyra mercenary band and controlled the Order of the Valley of Sunshine. Ice had covered Lorden's body when cracking sounds suddenly sounded over his body. The frozen beads of sweat scattered down from his body down to the floor like gleaming pearls, shattering into shards of ice when they came in contact with the stone ground. Shivering involuntarily, Lorden sneezed and wrapped a fur cape around himself tightly, then looking at Han Shao with surprise. "What kind of technique was that? I couldn't sense any fighting aura or magic, but why did it have the power of the two combined? I couldn't feel any ripples of fighting aura or magic from you either, but your strength isn't any less than a swordmaster and his fighting aura. This is nothing to be shocked about." Han Shao shrugged and responded with a smile. "Us berserkers have a special way of training and a very specialized method at that. You're not a berserker, how can you do this? This is truly very strange." Lorden looked askance and shook his head. "Alright, I think this wasn't your point in inviting us here." Han Shao walked leisurely to the front and sat down on a stone seat not too far from Lorden, also calling out to Trunks and Emily as well. After the blows they'd just exchanged, Han Shao understood that Lorden was likely stronger than himself. The Kyra mercenary band's greatest enemy currently was the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries, so Lorden definitely hadn't invited them to come so he could act against them. Therefore Han Shao was quite at ease. Emily and Trunks also walked over carelessly when they saw Han Shao so relaxed, pulling over a stone stool each for a seat. "Harris, what's Florida's condition now after returning to the Rainbow Sickles?" Lorden revealed an approving look at Han Shao and the other's nonchalance and lifted his head to look at Harris. "Florida suddenly fell into a coma at the door in front of the valley and was brought back to the Rainbow Sickles. According to our reports, he should still be comatose, so we don't know his condition right now either." Harris displayed an appropriate amount of respect in front of Lorden and responded quickly. Nodding, Lorden rubbed his gleaming bald head and seemed to contemplate something. He looked at Han Shao after a while and said loudly, "Your strength isn't bad. I'd hoped that you would consider joining our Kyra mercenary band, but since you know Trunks Trunks, you likely won't be willing to. I know Florida's strength and I tested you just now. I think it would be impossible for you yourself to harm him to that degree, not to mention that he had some experts by his side. Can you tell me what happened? An enemy helped me. Edwin, who entered the valley today, happened to be enemies with Florida's grandfather. Florida bumped into Edwin along the way and the two fought first. I just happened to take advantage of the situation, Han Shao responded honestly, since the truth was easy enough to decipher and there was nothing worth concealing about it. Edwin, Dark Archmage Edwin of the Calamity Church, that old monster has entered the valley. Lorden was startled and he turned his head to look at Harris. That would be him. Another masked woman entered the valley after a while and is staying with him for now. Harris nodded and responded to Lorden. This person is very difficult to handle. He's your enemy? Lorden smoothed over his gleaming head again and appeared a bit troubled. Lorden, I haven't heard that you were afraid of anyone all these years. Can it be that an old man is frightening you? It looks like the stronger you are, the more cowardly you've become. Trunks seemed to know the meaning behind Lorden's head rubbing and couldn't help but mock him. I'm not afraid of him, I'm afraid of the Calamity Church behind him. This is the most evil cult in all of the Profound Continent and they never adhere to any rules or logic. Their power is incredibly vast as well. They won't rest if you provoke them, and all the kingdoms on the continent are quite scared of them, not just our Valley of Sunshine. Lorden rubbed his head and spoke with some worry. The Calamity Church was the disaster and nightmare of the entire continent. They nursed some unreasonable fervent ideals and tried to use their power to destroy all those who didn't agree with them. Even the Lancelot Empire would react as if facing an oncoming enemy when they heard of the Calamity Church, not to mention a mid-sized mercenary band. From this point alone it was apparent to see that the church was very terrifying indeed. Edwin is my enemy and Florida's as well. Now that he's within the valley, I think he'll be making a move. Not much expression could be seen on Han Shao's face as he opened his mouth to speak dispassionately. I've heard that Miss Phoebe of the Boost Merchant Guild is buying a shop for you. That shop is in a forbidden zone within the Valley of Sunshine. It's rumored that it's been cursed by an evil god. Any who've bought that shop in recent years have all died from having their blood drained. Do you really plan on buying it? Lorden didn't keep asking about Edwin as he raised the next topic of interest. Indeed, I've never believed in any curse from an evil god. I hope Chief Lorden will sell that shop to me, Han Shao admitted and responded. Brian, why do you want that shop? I've heard of that place as well. Many died there when the Rainbow Sickles were in charge. We even made an investigation once but found nothing. That's an unlucky place, don't take that risk. Trunks was quite startled when he heard this and immediately turned back to frown at Han Shao. Emily was also startled. She turned to fix her stare on Han Shao. No, don't take the risk. I've heard of that place too. There's an incredible curse there. You can't take that. There are still some unclaimed shops within the valley. I just want to know why that one? Lorden obviously didn't care about Han Shao's well-being. He only wanted to know Han Shao's motivations, which was why he was questioning Han Shao. I have no comment about this. Why, I hope you can give the shop to me. I'll pay you a reasonable price. Han Shao could understand from Lorden's words that Phoebe hadn't succeeded yesterday. Lorden looked all brawn and no brains, but Han Shao knew that he certainly wasn't as simple as he appeared from the surface. If he was, he would have sold that curse land to Phoebe a long time ago. Of course I have no right to interfere in your personal matters, but I have power over the shop in the valley. I have the authority not to sell it to you. Lorden put on a dashing air and laughed heartily. Taking a deep breath, and Han Shao said, alright, I won't push it if you don't want to sell it to me. I think we can leave if there's nothing else. It looks like there's not much left for us in the Valley of Sunshine. We should be leaving now. Perhaps you do need to leave, but Trunks will likely stay. Hey, is that right, Trunks? Lorden looked at Trunks with a look of confidence on his face. Snorting coldly, Lorden had indeed touched upon a matter important to Trunks as the latter threw out a ferocious glare. Han Shao was absolutely confident in obtaining the place of extreme water. He'd pretended he was going to leave only because he wanted to haggle with Lorden. However, it had seemed like Lorden had seemed to understand something and had seized on Trunks' weak point. Lorden had been observing Han Shao and Trunks' expression since they walked in and was certain that they had a deep friendship. When he tested Han Shao, Lorden had mentioned the matter of the shop. Han Shao had then taken out his full strength in response. This made Lord understand that Han Shao cared a great deal about the shop. I said in the very beginning that I wanted to talk about a spot of business with you. I tested your strength just now. You do indeed have the right to sit down and talk with me. Now with Florida in the mix, this matter will be a bit easier to handle. This is a win-win situation. I wonder if you're interested? Lorden was completely unafraid that Han Shao wouldn't accept as he chuckled. Speak, what kind of business? Han Shao sat down lazily on the chair and flicked a glance at Lorden. Very simple. You continue about your business, which is to kill Florida. Our Kyra mercenary Ben will supply intelligence and can also guarantee that the Rainbow Sickles won't send forth their troops against you. After the deed is done, you can get that shop for free and Trunks will have gotten his revenge. There will also be one less threat to us. Isn't this great joy all around? Lorden raised a very alluring proposal. It seemed like a win-win, no matter how one looked at it, with no one being the worse off. However, Han Shao still didn't immediately agree to it. Rather, he remained silent for a while and suddenly said, you need to provide men as well to help us handle Edwin. Otherwise our safety isn't guaranteed with this person around. Friend, don't ask for too much. Actually, if we go find Edwin, we may have a better partnership effect with him. Lorden shook his head and declined with a darkened expression. Alright then, go cooperate with Edwin. Han Shao spread out his hands and couldn't seem to care less. The Calamity Church wasn't made of kind people. Anyone who cooperated with them had to worry about going up in flames, particularly as Edwin was a dark archmage. If Lorden cooperated with him, it wasn't completely assured that Lorden could maintain control over the situation. In addition, the Calamity Church had always been an organization on the continent that was hated by men and gods alike. If the Kyra mercenary band cooperated with Edwin, this would be a lethal blow to their reputation. If this matter was leaked, all of the merchants within the valley would surely be incensed then, and the Kyra mercenary band's position within the valley would be subject to great challenge. Han Shao had said this because he deduced this point. We can't help you fight Edwin, as it's not a wise move to offend them for Florida's matter, but we can use our advantage in the valley to supply you with intelligence of Edwin's movements. We'll tell you in advance no matter where he wishes to go. This way your safety will increase as well. This is the best we can do, otherwise we really have no deal, Lorden said slowly. Alright then, it's settled. Han Shao understood that this was the most that Lorden could do. The threat from the Calamity Church was so great that the Kyra mercenary band weren't willing to make enemies of them. Very happy to be working with you. If you're willing, please stay for lunch first. Lorden seemed to be in a great mood, having settled the matter, and he made this suggestion with a hearty laugh. No thanks, we have other matters to discuss. Han Shao demurred and then walked out with Emily and Trunks. Brian, are you familiar with Miss Phoebe of the Boost Merchant Guild? Trunks' expression was a bit strange on the way back, and he suddenly stopped in a quiet corner to ask Han Shao. Nodding, Han Shao said, that's right, our relationship is very good. She's my girlfriend. What of it? Trunks' handsome face revealed a strange light to it beneath the rays of the sun. He looked deeply at Han Shao. Brian, look. The Valley of Sunshine is a marvelous place. You can start your own power if you have enough ability, and if we develop using the Valley of Sunshine as our center of operations, we can have our own faction as well. You have Miss Phoebe as your friend, and so you'll definitely have enough gold. I have some seasoned mercenaries on my hand. We can absolutely use these resources to form our own mercenary band and form our own power. If we hold greater power in our hands, we'll be able to obtain more and won't have to be restrained by others anymore. Honestly, with Lorden's strength, he doesn't need to fear that old monster Edwin. Add to that his Kyra mercenary band. It's not difficult if he wants to kill Edwin. He fears the Calamity Church behind Edwin. He's also on his guard against Florida, not because of his own strength alone, but the Rainbow Sickles that follow him as well. After all, one person's strength is insufficient to contend with the factions. As long as we work hard with the combination of our advantages and the peculiarities of the Valley of Sunshine, we can absolutely form an independent power. This way, no matter where we are in the future, the volume that we speak with will be different if we have this power in hand. This suggestion was filled with a fervor that filled Han Shao's mind like the finest cream. He suddenly understood something, as a heart that had never been willing to be ordinary suddenly started beating even more fiercely. You mean that the two of us should build a power that belongs to us alone? Han Shao Sha'o's voice sounded a bit emotional at complete odds with his usual indifference. Nodding his head firmly, Trunks continued. Indeed, some of the original Rainbow Sickle brothers are stabled in the mountain ranges around the valley after receiving my news. However, although their talents are extraordinary, life has been a bit difficult for them because they've lost the halo of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band. However, the strength and quality are without a doubt the best. I've been hunting all sorts of magical creature cores in the dark forest these years and have created a small stash of wealth with my greed. However, it's still a bit difficult to satisfy the needs of the operations of a mercenary band. But you have a deep relationship with Miss Phoebe, and if we obtain the support of sufficient gold, we can absolutely form a mercenary band with my current network. When our operations are large enough and we have our own reputation, not only will we not need additional gold, but we'll be able to amass our own wealth through various missions and methods to slowly strengthen our power. If our mercenary band can take control of the valley like the Cairo mercenary band to protect the profits of the merchants, we'll have several 100,000 gold coins in fees every year. With such a power in our hands, our identity will be different in front of any person or country. Brian, Trunks' suggestion is sound. The organization won't mind another identity. In fact, the stronger your other identity is, the more use you're for the organization. The speed of your promotion will be faster within. It's a good compliment. If you reach a certain scale, then maybe the upper levels will send someone to help you, so you have even more power. Emily was also an ambitious woman, and her voice had become charged with emotion the more the conversation progressed. Come, let's go back and thoroughly discuss this. Han Sha'o's decision had already been made. He spoke slowly with a strange smile on his face. Chapter 205. Then call it Soul Destroyer. After a short conversation, Han Sha'o understood that Trunks had already gathered several dozen original Rainbow Sickle mercenaries to take on Florida. These people hadn't entered the valley yet, but were staying in a mountain cave on the outskirts of the valley and waiting for Trunks' orders. Trunks was part of the Rainbow Sickles before and had a treasure trove of experiences being a mercenary. He was well versed in the operations of a mercenary band and only lacked the funds to register a mercenary band and to maintain its daily operations. Phoebe controlled the Boost Merchant Guild, and there were many opportunities to earn money from that guild alone. In addition, the Boost Merchant Guild was quite well off, and it could certainly temporarily fill in the gap of capital. Emily had an enormous intelligence network within the Dark Mantle. With her position and role, she could absolutely supply much valuable information to Han Sha'o and Trunks. Not only was Emily quite excited about their conversation, but so was Phoebe, highly interested as well. Han Sha'o was well acquainted with Trunks' abilities and strength. Han Sha'o knew that once the mercenary band was created and running, their business wouldn't be too poor. Trunks, give me an estimate of how much gold you're still short on? Han Sha'o looked at Trunks and asked. Han Sha'o and Phoebe had both expressed strong interest up to the point. As the owner of the Boost Merchant Guild, it wasn't difficult for Phoebe to resolve the issues with lack of funding. Now that Trunks heard Han Sha'o ask the critical question, he responded with some excitement. Registration depends on the number of members, and each member's salary, equipment, weapons and horses, as well as the band's facilities, will need gold coins. Only 50 to 60 people have currently come forth to the Valley of Sunshine. They were all the key members of the Rainbow Sickles before. Using them as a base to form a new mercenary band, we'll need to put forth only 20,000 gold coins in the beginning. We may need to add to that in the future according to member strength and numbers, but once our mercenary band's reputation is set and we have stable partners we work with, not only will we not need to further invest in more gold, we'll be able to save money and slowly increase our strength. Han Sha'o looked at Phoebe and then at Trunks, smiling faintly. I had great gains during our last trip in the dark forest. I think I can set up the mercenary band with the wealth I amassed last time. Han Sha'o had obtained large amounts of gems and crystals from the dark elves and lizard men during his trip to the underground world, not to mention his last haul of jewels from the forest trolls' sacred ground, which had been even greater than the last batch he'd handed over to Phoebe. When Han Sha'o took out all the wealth he'd collected during this time, Phoebe, Emily and Trunks were all stunned and flabbergasted. The many splendid colors sparkled from the gems and beautiful jade beneath the light of the lamps. There was a small mountain's worth of wealth, and even wealthy folk such as Emily and Phoebe were momentarily stunned by the sight. "Oh my gosh, where did you get all this?" Emily cried out in astonishment as shock was written all over her face. "You already offered a pile of treasure last time, and this time's has been even greater. Exchanging this amount of treasure into gold coins would net you 50,000 gold coins at a minimum. Where did you get this from?" Phoebe was similarly surprised. After being momentarily stunned, Trunks shook his head with a wry smile. "I spent 3 years in the dark forest and hunted hundreds of magical creatures, but only made less than 10,000 gold coins." "You kid are certainly impressive. Change all of this into gold coins for me, then take 30,000 as the initial investment into Trunks' mercenary band. Keep the rest with you so that you can collect the items I need." Han Sha-Oh smiled faintly and spoke to Phoebe. Han Sha-Oh had already quite trusted Phoebe before they had confirmed their relationship, and now that they'd had touched each other intimately, he naturally had even fewer reservations. Phoebe also felt that Han Sha-Oh's trust was quite par for the course and nodded in acceptance. She laughed softly. "Don't worry, I'll handle everything for you. The Valley of Sunshine is the best place to conduct transactions. I'll turn all these items into gold coins for you over the next 2 days." When Emily saw that Han Sha-Oh had handed over such an enormous amount of wealth without reservation to Phoebe, she became noticeably jealous. But she knew that as the owner of the Boost Merchant Guild, it was most reasonable for Phoebe to undertake this matter, so there was not much else she could do. Where did you get this bow?" Trunks suddenly walked over with an odd expression on his face as Phoebe was putting all the items away into her space ring. He picked up a bow with bizarre patterns and turned to ask Han Sha-Oh. Han Sha-Oh suddenly remembered that this bow was from the Dark Elves when Trunks posed this question to him. The original holders had expended all his life force to shoot one arrow and cause great injury to Gilbert. After Han Sha-Oh had obtained this bow, he didn't come to any conclusion after some research. Ad taught that his lack of desire to expend his life force in shooting the bow, he'd thrown it into his space ring without further question. "I got it from the hands of a Dark Elf family in the underground world. This bow is quite odd. It seems to be able to absorb one's life force to shoot a frightening arrow," Han Sha-Oh explained. "Oh my gosh, legends speak of a bow cursed by Rose. That should be it. The legends say that the evil goddess Rose of the Dark Elves once cursed this bow so that it would absorb the life force of the wielder to shoot out an arrow of terrifying force. Usually only perverse folks who wish to seek revenge at the cost of their own life would use it." Emily exclaimed as she'd heard of the legends of this bow. "Indeed, this is the bow. However, I heard that this bow was a marvelous treasure that could increase thunder magic before it was cursed. If thunder mages held the bow, they could use it to shoot out astounding electricity with great power," Trunks explained to Han Sha-Oh as he held onto the bow. "Keep it, maybe someone will be able to cleanse it of its curse in the future. If the curse is removed, then this bow will become a treasure that thunder mages fight over." Emily thought for a moment and said to Han Sha-Oh, "It wasn't likely that many would dare buy a bow that absorbs the wielder's life force anyways." As a magical cultivator, Han Sha-Oh would be able to use his own magical yuan to create formations and forge magical weapons as his strength increased. Perhaps he'd be able to cleanse the curse on it in the future. Therefore Han Sha-Oh nodded to Emily's words and put the bow away. "All right, perhaps we can possibly use an altar in the future to communicate with the evil goddess so that she'll remove it. Let's try in the future." After obtaining Clarendon's memories, Han Sha-Oh understood a bit about communicating with evil gods. The basic principle was that as long as you could supply something that the evil god wanted, you'd be able to receive a corresponding boon from the evil deity. This was actually just a sort of business transaction. The sparkling and gleaming jewels had been stored into Phoebe's space ring in a short span of time. Han Sha-Oh thought for a moment and took out another set of dwarf-forged weapons, handing over a heavy battle axe to Trunks. Han Sha-Oh smiled. "What do you think about this quality?" Trunks' eyes had already started gleaming when Han Sha-Oh had taken out the weapons. He picked up the battle axe without another word. As he waved it around once, a howling sound emitted from the battle axe's shining surface. There was a national wave of cold-killing intent emanating from the battle axe as Trunks held it in his hands. "This is great. Where did you get it?" Trunks was delighted as he looked at Han Sha-Oh. "The dwarves forged all of these weapons. Perhaps there will be something within this file that's suitable for our comrades. Han Sha-Oh smiled faintly. Haha, I think they'll like it. Dwarf forged weapons are renowned in the lands. I knew these were no ordinary items when you took them out just now. Trunks happily accepted these weapons and placed them into his space ring. He was quiet for a bit and then looked seemingly carelessly at Han Sha-Oh, smiling. Chief, everything is ready now and we just await a striking name from you. Han Sha-Oh started after hearing these words, then smiled and waved his hands. I just need to be vice chief, that's enough for me. The real chief should be you. You decide the band's name. Trunks had been wreathed in smiles just now when he suddenly grew serious and declined gravely. You must be the chief of the mercenary band. This matter isn't open for discussion. I'd rather decline your good intention if you refuse, and nothing we've talked about before will count for anything. Emily and Phoebe had actually wanted to ask a long time ago who was the owner of the mercenary band. However, it wasn't the thing to do to actually open one's mouth and discuss this, so they'd kept things in and had planned on taking some time out to discuss with Han Sha-Oh. To the two girls, they would only help the mercenary band if the band was Han Sha-Oh's. They were unfamiliar with Trunks and nationally didn't have any relationship with him. Although Han Sha-Oh and Trunks seemed close, they were naturally unwilling to put their lives on the line for Trunks. The two girls paid a great deal of attention after Trunks brought up what was troubling them. Their beautiful eyes looked between Han Sha-Oh and Trunks, continuously anxiously waiting for their decision. Trunks, I know nothing about the formation and management of a mercenary band. It's a bit inappropriate if I'm the chief. Han Sha-Oh truly didn't know what a mercenary band needed. No worries, you just need to give general guidelines orders. I can take care of everything else for you as vice chief. Brian, Miss Phoebe and Madam Emily will help me only if you're the chief. I don't have the charisma to obtain their support. Trunks self-deprecated and winked at Han Sha-Oh. Since this is the case, don't continue to decline. Emily wasn't awkward at all, as if Trunks' words had been quite ordinary. Phoebe also nodded with a remote expression and turned to Han Sha-Oh. That's right, I'll only help this mercenary band unconditionally if you're the chief. Alright, men should be more decisive. Hurry and decide on the mercenary band's name so I can go register it and officially give my brothers a new home. Trunks looked at Han Sha-Oh and urged him onwards. Han Sha-Oh was actually more aware than anyone of the circumstances at hand. When he saw that all that needed to be taken care of had been decided, he no longer hesitated and nodded his head in agreement. Alright, then call it the Soul Destroyer Mercenary Band. You're so fake. You even thought of the name already and said you didn't want the position. You had to make a show of declining, so shameless. Trunks couldn't help but laugh and yell at Han Sha-Oh when he heard Han Sha-Oh immediately give out a name. Emily and Phoebe both looked askance at Han Sha-Oh. They too hadn't expected that Han Sha-Oh would think of a name so quickly. They then understood that Han Sha-Oh had long since had intentions of taking control of the mercenary band, and he'd put on a show of declining just now. He's always been this shameless. Emily and Phoebe both deeply agreed with Trunks' words and actually opened their mouths to say the same thing. When they finished speaking, they discovered that they'd actually voiced the exact same words. This made them quite amused as they started giggling softly. Alright, let's call it the Soul Destroyer Mercenary Band. I'm going to go about my business now, you guys can too, Trunks said.